You want to be my subject? You want to stand up real quick? Stand up for me? Yeah, no, I mean, try looking at the camera. See if you are in the frame.
No. I tilted it down. That's why.
That
Okay.
should be okay.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. Great.
I think I don't like it. I might have motion there, yeah.
I'll be. When you guys are done, you guys just let me know. I'll be right outside waiting. Yeah.
And then you can sit inside and watch if you want.
I don't want to bother. Or actually, I'll just come up later.
Okay.
Around 6 minutes.
Hanafi, I'll be sharing. Which motion did you guys veto?
We vetoed first.
And you guys?
We vetoed third.
Alright, second motion. Alright, all good? Okay, fine. See you.
Hold up. Oh, there we go.
You can get it straight from Sunway later. Right, starting speech in 3, 2, 1. So the few things I'm going to do in my speech though is that prove to you why is it much that environmental pushback against AI adoption is largely ineffective. And one of the reasons why is that it's wasting social and political capital. Because let's characterize how do environmental groups look like in the current fight against environmental issues here. We already know that environmental groups are already on the social narrative back foot, where activists are painted as eco-terrorists just for throwing soup at paintings and like chaining themselves to trees or super gluing themselves next to Teslas or whatever it is, right? So the idea here that it is already pariahs of society, I don't know if I'm using that word correctly. So it is more like, so on our side, our stance here is that we think that the pushback against AI adoption is bad. We think that this 100% pushback is not a good thing. What we're going to do is that we're going to make sure that AI adoption is going to be more environmentally adaptive, and we want AI in order to be something that green tech or environmentalists can get behind. So the reason why is that we understand that AI is something that is extremely pervasive and also something that a lot of people treasure and cherish and find it very integrated into their daily lives. The sentimental part of AI here is that a lot of people are using it. It is very hard for people to extract it out of their lives purely because of this, not purely, but one of the things that makes it so hard is because of the practical things that it gives to people, and therefore that's why it gives people so much, that's why AI is something that society is more often than not very favorable towards. So because of that, we think that environmental groups have the incentive to align themselves socially towards the idea of, because this AI is something that's socially trending, to regain, to change the shift in popularity and optics so people don't see them as a bunch of hippies or people that cause trouble just for the sake of it, right? So the other thing that we want to talk about here is that why is it that integration is better as a form of like Yeah, sure, Ryan.
Would you rather watch AI generated porn or would you rather watch real porn?
Of what AI does in your specific one is matter to this, because like it's about how AI is being used, but not about this specific use of AI that you want to talk about, right? So here's the thing, right? Why we think that people are more likely than not going to be more trending or understanding towards AI. And also, I want to talk about why is it that this environmental groups advocating for the adoption of AI is going to be a tipping point for more green tech under our side of the house as opposed to them, right? Because let's take a look at how green tech actually looks like right now. When the people talk about your is it windmills, no, wind farms, solar farms, whatever it is, we have suffered under decades of obfuscation, of a lot of pushback, a lot of lobbying about why is it that one is ugly or that climate change isn't real. We get so much things where even John Oliver has to host a segment of one geoscientist versus hundreds of hoax spinners or whatever it is that you call it. And we see that a lot of people don't see it because the processes of climate change are so slow, it's very abstract, and obfuscation happens to them. So it's very hard for them to opt into green tech because they really don't see the harms that people claim that green tech is going to solve. But here's the difference, right? This is the tipping point. AI is something tangible. AI is something that they use. AI is something that they actually experience it for themselves. And again, like my previous framing has already integrated into their life so much. It's in everything that you do. You want to Google search, unfortunately, Gemini already tells you the first thing before it even shows you images or anything like that. Or even in the BYD that Gelson drives, there's an AI telling him where to go. I don't know how electronic vehicles work, but let's say Gelson is going to support me on this, right? So the problem here is that because it is so integrated into people's lives, right? It's much more easier for environmentalists to go and push this idea towards people. So people are like, you know what? It is benefiting something that I already feel very passionately about. It is something that I want to keep around. Because I would rather support someone it's easier to support green tech if it promotes something that I already love. So this is about optics. This is making sure that AI is something that, because AI is something that people support, environmental groups find it much easier to push green tech towards them. Because AI also needs green tech in order to survive. Because if it continues this self-destructive path of creating so much pollution and whatnot, it requires a sustainable energy source in order for it to function. It also requires states to be okay with it. If they produce more and more damage, it is more likely than not people are going to push their politicians in order to push back against this and whatnot, right? So that's why it is very important for us it's very important for us to have the green tech here under our side of the house here, right? So the other thing that I want to talk about here is that who controls AI and why are they harder to fight against, right? We already see, so here's the comparative, right? Environmental corporations already have, environmental groups already have a very hard time fighting other large corporations in other fronts that they currently have, right? Which is like the car companies and the other sort of very, very pollutive kind of things, right? We already see that they're very much on the back foot against these things because they are huge corporations controlled by billionaires. And so similarly to these other industries, environmental groups haven't necessarily successfully engaged with this situation. And this situation is quite similar in that because they failed to do so, right? So because of this, it is much more difficult for them to do so. And then further characterization of why AI companies have this additional nuance of being a much more dangerous adversary for environmental groups is that AI companies are riding a very huge and tumultuous economic bubble up and are cornered animals as opposed to proud established beasts like automotive corporations. And they are much more dangerous because this is a matter of life and death for the corporations, right? They spend billions developing their codes and push businesses to integrate AI into their services. There is no, so far right now, because there's no credible way, there's this bubble, there's a reason why it's called a bubble because it hasn't become a fundamental part of people's lives yet, as opposed to all these kind of industries I previously talked about. AI corporations are going to be much more fierce in their pushback against these environmental groups. So instead of environmental groups failing another campaign against huge corporations like they have before with previous ones, we think that this is a good chance to finally get a W. Because like what I said in my previously in my points, at the very least in this, we are able to maybe get green tech out of this, as opposed to the other stuff where we get maybe small sorts of concessions. But this is a huge tipping point for us because green tech has always been something that has eluded mass adoption inside by environmental groups. We think that AI is the way for us to achieve that.
And you generate the speech with AI. It's a troll. Like open source tool.
Can you hear me? All right, okay.
Maybe just move the monitor.
Tak apa lah, I'm already in frame, so it's okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, I'm going to start with setup and my responses will be integrated into my argumentation later. I think firstly, what we need to talk about is what this AI adoption necessarily looks like. I think when we think of AI adoption, especially in an environmental sense, we think about building data centers and the way that it has to take up a lot of land and that you have to use a lot of land for it. It has to use a lot of electricity, right? And this is particularly disruptive to like particular communities, to businesses, and like just the issue of it using just like way too much water, like, and that's not even the problem. You just can't even like use the water afterwards, which affects things like being able to do other things like agriculture, to plant trees, to like do all of these basic things, right? And there's so much direct environmental harm from AI adoption because of things of like the sheer amount of electricity and land and everything that it has to use, because more electricity means more fossil fuels that are being burned, and you need it consistently because that's how data centers work, right? And this directly degrades the environment because you cannot then rely on like things that are inconsistent, like solar energies and like the green tech that they want to talk about, right? Okay, I think then we also have to talk about like what the environmental movement, like what their point is. I think firstly is just to protect the environment in general. Like they want to garner buy-in, they want to garner support, they want to make sure that we like try our best to not like harm the environment as much as possible, because we have to take care of our planet, because we still have to live on the planet, and like all the other like bad things towards like specific communities that happens when you like have a bad environment, right? Like the health issues and like the problem with like certain communities not being able to live like well. I think then why this pushback is necessary is because like there is already a general trend towards like AI not being well liked by individuals. Like people are generally anti-AI, even if this is not because of an environmental reason. It is generally like it is part of the reason, right? Like people don't like AI because of like it's making us dumber. It's like losing like people making art out of AI is like making people lose creativity, like all of these things, right? But I think like there's also the environmental component. It just gives them another reason to hate it, and more people are like being anti-AI and not wanting to use it, right? Like I think this is like particularly important because at the very least on our side of the house, people don't do like stupid shit like don't do stupid shit like using AI for everything. There has to be some degree of pushback because on their side of the house, like people just continue to use AI because their entire case is just, people will transition into AI once it's more palatable. And but by the time it's more palatable, you degrade the environment so severely because the problem here is just the timeline of it. Like you know already that like the environmental movement is like having a hard time and like this won't be taken well. So what do? You just wait. You have to wait it out until it gets to a point where it's so severe where this idea of green, like integrating green tech into like AI adoption becomes more palatable. But the problem is then how many communities will be lost, how much of the environment is going to be degraded, how much like are we going to lose before we get to that point where you can actually use green tech, right? Or integrate it into like AI adoption. Yeah, I'll take one.
So far, all of your arguments are arguing for a hypothetical future. Prospective debate, please tell us why the movement so far has been successful in its pushback.
Okay, it's the thing, right? We don't necessarily have to prove that this is somewhat effective, even though I will prove to you that it is somewhat effective. We say that it is necessary. This pushback is particularly necessary, firstly, because on a principle level, like the environmental movement should be against AI adoption, right? Like you are against big oil and big gas, but you're not against AI adoption, even though like it's harming the same people that you're trying to protect, the same groups and the same aspects of the environment that you yourself are fighting for, right? And you're going against like all these other people. You lose your credibility in that way. Why do people want to stand with you? Like if you have to stand like for it as long as it directly and severely impacts the environment in a negative way, you have a principal responsibility to do so. Why then is like the environmental movement in the unique position to be like this actor, right? I think then like the environmental movement, just as a movement, like they require like critical mass, they're a collective, right? Which means that they are in the unique position to have things like social capital, like people do buy into it. They can also do things like have campaigns where they talk about like the harms of AI, like and how using it like is particularly bad, right? They can want people to stop using AI in that way as well. They can do online campaigns, they can do protests, like they can just this is the type of pushback that we're talking about because it's not as extreme as like protest necessarily. It's just by making sure that your common individual like on the ground doesn't necessarily use AI for like everything, right? Because I don't think we can stop people from using AI completely, but the problem then on their side of the house is that it is completely unchecked, right? You just allow it to happen. When the environmental movement stops pushing back, that is a huge actor with like a bunch of branches all over the world. There are so many people who consider themselves environmentalists, right? But when this pushback no longer exists, like against AI adoption specifically, people just think that they can run rampant with it, right? You give them an inch, they take a mile. Like it's just going to become people, just students using it for their homework or like all the time without even thinking about the environmental movement. At the very least, when you have things like online campaign, it's in your face. At the very least, right? You have to think about it whether you like it or not. Like all of these like negative things, and that is only possible when an actor like the environmental movement is pushing back against this. No, yeah. What was I saying? Yeah. I think then you also have the problem of like pushback within your like environmental movement itself. I think people who are like devout environmentalists like also are devout environmentalists because they are usually directly affected by the harms of like AI or like the environmental harms itself, right? I think then when you have someone who has been supporting the environmental movement in so far or is an activist, when you as the environmental movement stop like being against like things like AI adoption, you lose like these people lose faith in you. They don't want to be part of like your movement anymore because they feel like you're unprincipled and they don't want to be part of it. Why is this necessarily bad? Because then your other causes within the environmental movement also lose out, right? All like your fights against like I don't know, like the animal trafficking thing, like against like pollution and like all of these things, against big oil and gas and like all of these other things, right? They also lose out because then your environmental movement is slowly losing its credibility. It's slowly losing people supporting in it because it just feels like you're not standing for like the most prevalent issue right now. Because just think about how insanely prevalent the issue of AI is right now and how much people talk about it right now, right? Everybody knows about it, and most people know the environmental harms. Like you cannot think of AI without thinking about like how much water it uses, and that is only possible because the environmental movement has taken it upon itself to actually speak out about it. Like this is a necessary opposition because there needs to be someone opposing it. Even if it never gets solved, there always needs to be pushback so that there is more regulation. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Opposition doesn't seem to know what pushback means because pushback doesn't refer to the improvement of AI or the way in which you could make it much more environmentally friendly, for instance. Pushback refers to the overall rejection of the use of AI and everything that the LO has previously told you. The reason for why I say this is because everything that they have told you thus far doesn't really seem very grounded in the way people actually react to it, like political rhetoric surrounding AI and whether or not the environmental movement has actually succeeded in its efforts thus far. If it is true that you bought the POI that we told you about this being a retrospective debate, because this house regrets, then you have to also buy that the burden of the GAF is also to therefore explain why exactly it is that this movement has so far done the correct things and made the correct decisions, as opposed to maybe having gone through the counterfactual of further discussions and further cooperation, like what Ms. Chan posited to you in his speech. The first thing I want to engage with in his speech is a contradictory logic at the start of the LO speech. Because on one hand, according to the LO, people are already largely anti-AI, regardless of the pushback of the environmental movement. People are already very aware that the AI has like some sort of issue or like has some ethical issues that will cause people to also not want to like use AI. But apparently on the other, and this is the main utility that they have coming out from the odd case, by the way, the pushback is necessary to educate people to not use AI, at least on the individual level. If people are already going to be aware of AI's flaws, regardless of your environmental movement's pushback, why is the pushback required or necessary to be able to get people to stop using AI in the best case of their case? In the very best case on their side, they are completely inexclusive because we just literally agree that you don't really need to have this pushback or this overall rejection from the of the environmental movement. If what LO says at the end of their speech is that someone has to be against AI, sure, I guess those people who are not in the environmental movement can be against AI and can act actively advocate, but what we want is the significant incorporation of AI, because in the case where AI is an inevitability, is something that we cannot actively push against. The adoption of a far more environmentally harmful form of AI is something that will damage the environment significantly more on their side. But the second thing I want to respond to on engagement is the principle of necessity coming up from the side. Okay, look, the most straightforward way to outweigh the principle on why it is just a good thing to fight for is it is still predicated on outcome. If you do not manage to prove why your movement is successful or has been successful so far, or if you do not prove why your utility coming in from this sort of advocacy is successful, that means any form of justification on why this is the good thing to do because it is environmentally friendly, it doesn't happen. It's just like you are not environmentally friendly because this is the wrong principle for you to engage with. This is also why, even if the environmental movement was against oil, for instance, and this is the example that LO uses, you are still largely open to discussions about oil alternatives, and you're still largely open to discussions about how you can improve the way in which companies interact with oil or other ways in which you'll be able to use oil to maybe a lesser extent with through the alternatives of others. Why is this inapplicable towards AI, however? There is no alternative to AI. What opposition is fighting for is a complete rejection and a total pivot away from the billions and trillions of dollars that have already been invested into AI. And even if you're talking from the very start of the beginning of AI, it has been true from the very beginning that the narrative and the rhetoric being pushed from billionaire CEOs from the very beginning, that AI is an inevitability, that the automation of workforces and the automation of systems across the board is something that was always going to be the case, always going to be the strategy from these companies from the very beginning. This shows to you exactly why it is impossible for you to be able to push for things like this eventual this eventual cooperation coming out from the op. But finally, why exactly was the fight impossible to begin with? And we told you this very clearly from the PM speech. But the reason as to why they haven't fulfilled the retrospective burden yet is precisely because these companies were never going to bend to you. The actors that the environmental movement has historically engaged with have largely been more successful at the grassroots level, where individuals would be able to perfectly resonate with the analysis coming from the environmental movement, but there's very little effectivity when it came to the billions of dollars being given towards the companies that were able to out-lobby you, that were able to out-fund you, that you would never be able to stand up to unless you collectivize in the billions of different people. So in the 1 in a million chance that maybe they will be able to have some sort of say in the conversation between the environmental movement and the AI companies, they would still have to be able to explain why exactly it is that this would also still be able to be successful to entirely push that radical out, that radical rejection out of the way in the first place. What we told you instead was significantly more important. We told you why exactly it is not only been a failure so far for the environmental movement to reject AI, but it's also discounted away from multiple opportunities the environmental movement has had to work together with AI, to be able to at least cooperate and to be able to come to a compromise for a much more environmentally friendly alternative or solution towards innovation and development. This extension is going to explain to you precisely why. Any POIs? 3, 2, 1. That engagement note. First, 3 layers. The biggest hindrance of progressive development of AI is the animosity that generates from the incompatibility of the narrative. There are various benefits for companies as to why environmental lenses would actually benefit these companies. You have heavily freshwater reliant cooling systems that are not only incredibly expensive to build, but also a very finite resource that doesn't stretch to the long term. You have alternative code frameworks that you could look into that optimize operational corners or scaling down these these data centers to begin with. Start the engagement on. The reason as to why there isn't a rush or general acceptance to prioritize these innovations to begin with is precisely because of A, the significant animosities that have evolved throughout these extremely toxic discussions between the environmental movement and the rejection of AI thus far, but B, the refusal to work or cooperate with AI companies. That means that optimal actors to facilitate this research and development are not opting in at all. Yeah. PY.
Why would AI companies listen to the environmental movement? Roll to death.
Because I just told you the benefits that could come as a result of them working together with the environmental movement. The reason as to why they do not want these benefits is because the amount of effort it takes to fight you guys is not going to outweigh the benefits that it takes for them to incorporate things like the environmental movement. So all this means that they just simply have the animosity being the largest issue that blocks, because the lack of opt-in of the environmental movement and the refusal to cooperate has removed a major factor or a major actor in the possible improvement of or innovations of this. Historically speaking, speaking, the dynamic between environmental movement and companies has been tenuous, but not opposed to cooperation. Energy alternatives, for instance, had a general agreement that even though current practices of companies were environmentally harmful, you would still be able to maybe work towards other energy alternatives instead. Now they're no longer pushing for an alternative, they're pushing for an outright rejection. This means that there is 0% of a possibility for them to be able to push for a better form of AI. Our side was able to unlock the ability for us to optimize political capital, because in the very least, we would still be able to not only use a far more compromisable solution that we can work in the middle, that maybe even if we had to use AI, you'll be able to use less water. Even if you had to use AI, you'll be able to burn less trees. But in the very worst case, on their side, you will never be able to have these sort of cooperations or these compromises being made, precisely because you burn the bridges between those two.
Yeah.
I will take my constitutional 1 minute.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Something in scheme.
1 minute to type a plot prompt.
Okay, I will also use my 1 minute later. Additional right by then. Belum sampai aja dong. Are you start your switch Sure, here are some reasons why. Not you. Hey, 1 minute over.
Hey, shut up lah. Alright, sorry. Oh. See, my bad. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I don't have a proper opening line, so I'll just explain what the meta is of this debate, because that's how debating works now. First, I'll explain why we get more external buy-in. Second, I'll explain why they get more internal backlash. And third, I'll explain why AI companies are less likely to listen on their side of the house. Firstly, why do we get more external buy-in? First, I just want to point out, Judge, like I know what it's like to be as a judge judging Shivichi. This debate is fucking damn messy, because we don't know whether or not the average citizen hates AI, likes AI, and that's the biggest contention. I think the framing is a bit more charitable, because some people do use AI. They use AI for homework, research, to do their meta file, for example. But some people are also incredibly hesitant and are on the fence. I will explain why within all contexts generally, on their side, they'll suffer significantly more backlash. Firstly, I'll explain why is it that the fight against AI is good. So this is actually where I disagree with their frame. I don't think people really like AI, as according to Chan. I think they don't really like it, and I think they are likely to support the pushback against the movement, and that's for 4 reasons. 1, AI is incredibly damaging. AI is incredibly expensive and has massively increased the rent of living. No, data centers are being built in Manhattan at alarming rates, driving the cost of living up. On weighing, maybe it's true some people like AI because it's easy for homework, but it's also taken away jobs. In our scenario, when we explain the pushback for AI, we also tell you things about why AI is damaging, how AI impacts you and affects you, which is why it's important. Because even if it's true that it does help you with homework, it doesn't matter if you literally don't have a job, right? Which is why greater degrees of regulation are more likely to exist on our side, when people are likely to support us because we actually care about them. On their side, comparatively, you get backlash towards the movement because these people who care about AI and are anti-AI don't want to support the movement and feel like their jobs are being taken away, which is why you don't get that critical mass. Second, it's also easy for us to frame, even outside of the practical, why this hurts them. The creation of AI is killing animals, trees, and we can portray it as such. That poor father with a family of 5 is literally losing his job because of AI machines. As sympathetic, and that's how we garner empathy. On their side, people see that AI data centers and are being built, and they see the environmental movement just does not care, which is why these individuals are likely to lambast them against it. Third, even if true some people like AI, it's also like, guys, this movement is easily accessible, right? The barrier of entry is incredibly low when we literally just tell people not to use ChatGPT or Gemini for homework, to literally use Google. If back in the day, 10 years ago, freaking fucking Lee Sheng-Wu can use Google in order to meta file, so can we. Fourth, there's also general skepticism behind AI. Think of the Terminator movies, but also the amount of data leakage caused by AI. The fact that in Iran, their AI models are used to kill 150 schoolgirls in Iran already means that there's significant amount of pushback towards AI. On weighing, maybe it's true some people like AI, but we explain, on weighing, people are more likely to be disdained against it. What is the impact of this? On effectiveness, we think effectiveness exists on a spectrum. First, people start using AI less. If we can get that one Chinese Abeng and tailors to stop using AI for their law homework, that's a massive win because it means less trees being cut down. So instead of using AI for everything they don't know and they're lazy to summarize or spell check, we just explain not using it and using it only for 1 or 2 times when you actually need it is a massive win. Second, people stop using AI and boycott using these machines. When there's less demand for usage of AI materials, it means the creation of these data centers go down, and that means that there's less damage from AI. Third, AI companies also suffer because less people are using it and therefore less people using AI. Fourth is just lobbying and voting, and we can advocate for leaders like Andrew Yang or Zora Mandani who are anti-AI. For us to win, you just need to believe one of these impacts for us to win because we still find a way to damage AI. Sure.
So far, all of your benefits thus far are contingent on the idea of buy-in being important because we want to reject AI. If people already hate AI, why do you need buy-in to reject AI?
No, I'm saying some people already have a general disdain and hate towards AI, which is why they likely support the movement. But I also explain why people who generally do support AI, it's easy for us to convince them why they shouldn't like it because of how damaging it is towards them. Like it operates on those two frames, right? Now I'll explain why is it that on their side of the house, they're likely to get more external backlash. Firstly, cost benefit. There's very little reason for them want to join in the movement that actively advocates for model that takes away their job. But secondly, there's less empathy towards our movement because they view us inconsistent and makes us look bad. We cannot actively support a model that actively harms the environment while simultaneously say you must have greener policies and green tech when these things also happen as well. The impact of this is that people just don't join the movement. They view us hypocritical. It means people stop engaging with us as a whole, and that's the most important outcome. The second clash is on internal backlash. Why does this alienate our current supporters? And I'll note the importance of here. Even if it's true, external backlash isn't as the most important thing in debate because some people like AI, some people don't like AI. I will tell you who hates AI. Our supporters. Dove argues that, well, people perceive the green movement as hippies, but apparently so does the government. The people who are likely to be part of the environmental movements aren't hippie, but your average blue-collar workers who are the most affected by environmental damage. The conception of the environmental movement in the 1950s was comprised of not hippies, but blue-collar workers who were forced to live near rivers with massive oil dumping. In the 1980s, it was indigenous communities who, like shops and factories, were shut down because their trees were being taken away. In 2020, the environmental movement was composed of the victims of the California fire. This seems to suggest, why is it that this seems to suggest a general trend. Why in the instance where AI or any new forms of automation being created that actively harms their way of life is why these are the people who are most likely to opt into the movement and stay within the movement. What happens on our side? What happens on their side of the house the moment is what AI? Firstly, you get internal backlash, and the reason for this is because they are actively supporting AI data centers being built in the same areas where they are most affected. But second, even if that's not true, they increase electricity. The fact that AI is currently used to harm significantly more and more people by making things more and more expensive is precisely why it's so harmful. But thirdly, it's also by the fact that AI has just been massively used for pollution. Look at the amount of dumping that currently exists within rivers, which is why it's all significantly harmful. The last thing I'll prove is why AI companies are unlikely to listen. I want to note here, their case, in order for it to work, is that you manage to convince the external to support to manifest and the internal support to working to continue. Because on either side, they don't explain why AI companies will listen to you when your two biggest sources of leverage immediately disappear. Firstly, why is it will AI companies not listen to you or will be ineffective? One, AI companies are rich, and as long as people still use AI, AI is still likely going to be prominent and they're always going to seek out for more profit incentive mechanisms. Second, even if it is true they want to run the whole green energy argument and stock analysis from Ryan Lafferty, guys, they're going to advocate for green energy, not necessarily because, it's good for the environment, but mostly because it is easier and allows them to garner more and more profit, which is why on either side of the house, they're likely to opt into it. What did we explain on our side of the house? We explained why is it unlikely for their side. In order for you to get change, the moment you lose leverage, you don't get the average Joe supporting you who is heavily affected by AI because they're heavily affected by the environmental movement, which means you don't actually get that political lobbying or buying or support, which is why you don't have the ability to vote for better policies. But second, you lose out your main supporter base. You lose out on people who are willing to go out and protest and actively vote for you in these swing states. Maybe it's true when it comes to these AI companies, you don't get massive amount of change, but outside the house, firstly, you just get less and less AI use, which I think is already a massive win. But second, more importantly, our outcome is just significantly more certain. On their side, in order for me to believe that AI companies are likely to listen to you, means they completely ignore their profit incentive. Our side explains, fuck that, we hate AI. Thank you. Oh wait, we reply right? Yeah. Wolves? Can I please?
I know a way you can generate a speech fast.
Huh?
A way you can make a speech really fast.
Buy-in has zero impact if these people already agree with you. On our side, if people view AI to be inevitable economically because it is so integrated into our day-to-day living, the best next alternative was to reform the development of AI to be greener if people truly do care about the environment. The problem with this team is that even if they are able to argue that some kind of people do hate AI for the bunch of reasons that Ryan gave to you, the problem here is that they don't really prove as to why businesses or corporations that are using AI, they are integrating AI into their systems, are the ones that are receptive to those kinds of protests in the first place. Because for the vast majority of these companies and for the vast majority of these corporations, they use AI not because they want to listen to what people say, but because it's far more profitable, because it's more convenient, because it's more efficient. This means that on their side of the house, even if you get the support from people that traditionally do not like AI, it is unclear as to whether or not that support translates into any meaningful change when it comes to the company's behavior, when it comes to how they use AI. But more importantly, this team cannot just say that you get more support. They actually need to prove that businesses actually stop adopting AI in order for them to be able to accrue the impact. Insofar as they have not reached that burden, they cannot win this debate. Because even if you have so many people protesting against AI, so many people launching online campaigns against AI, insofar as nothing has changed, the corporations have not moved an inch, people are disillusioned, people become tired, people become burnt out, which means that support on their side of the house requires critical, immense social political capital that's likely going to be burnt out on their side because people gradually get more and more tired. But the first thing I want to acknowledge here is that a lot of the LR speech is very non-contentious. Because at most, we will explain that AI is bad for a variety of different reasons. The problem here is that they don't really prove as to why that pushback is one that is particularly effective. Because we explain that AI is already quite inevitable. It's very profitable, especially for the AI race or the increasing demand for AI usage by companies or individuals. So even if you get protests or online campaigns, they are not very effective because people already believe this to be a losing fight. But secondly, look at the stakeholder that LO says. These are people who are already generally against AI for a variety of different reasons. These are not the most important stakeholder in the round because these people would have opposed AI on either side of the house. You need to convince people that are on defense or you convince businesses that are using AI to stop using AI. The main problem with this team is they don't really prove that because if these people are already so against AI because it has drained their water, because it has displaced indigenous communities, those things would have occurred on either side. This is something that's fundamentally very symmetric. But secondly, we explain that on our side it's a lot better because we explain to why on their side it's a lot worse and it's a lot more ineffective. Firstly, corporations that sell AI and businesses that adopt AI are generally not very receptive to these kinds of protests because oftentimes people don't see these kinds of things, therefore they're buying the products, they're buying the stuff, they're buying the goods and services anyways, which means that oftentimes a lot of the adoption of AI is one that's very discreet and very secretive, and therefore even if you have protests, it's very unclear as to whether or not companies are themselves very receptive to those protests. Secondly, governments are oftentimes captured by AI lobbyists and big tech. They are far more influential when it comes to government policy making, when it comes to things like deregulation or the cutting down of red tape for big tech, which is that oftentimes, even if the green movement have some degree of lobbying, we need to assess the power of both of them, which is that intuitively, big tech and big AI often have a lot more power and a lot more say because they are the ones with the most amount of money to be able to capture governments. But thirdly, most people view AI to have some kind of utility to not wholly discard AI usage outright. Most people use AI for their homework. I know Ryan uses AI a lot for his homework, but the problem here is that a lot of people are against bad use of AI. They are against generative AI, generating like deep fake. They are against AI for when it generates like fake art, for example. Those are the reasons why people don't like AI, but they're not wholly against AI because they still use it within their day-to-day life anyways. Which means that even if you are able to get some people to opt out, it's unclear as to whether or not that's enough to be able to ensure that the development of AI meaningfully stops. But secondly, we explain that this requires immense social political capital to be exhausted, and thus many individuals are deterred or even disengaged from engaging in this particular form of advocacy because they view it to be an uphill battle in which they're going to lose. But secondly, why is the comparative far better? And this engages with Ryan's idea about how the AI developers won't listen to you. But let's see here. If on both sides of the house they don't listen to you, that pushback is meaningless because it means that you're wasting and you're burning away social political capital on an actor that fundamentally does not listen to you, does not care about your needs, does not care about your desire. So if this analysis is true for Ryan, it applies to their side of the house, which is why it's likely going to be a lot worse. Secondly, we explain why the green movement is a tipping point for this. Firstly, they're far more willing to incorporate green tech into AI system. The reasons why they do so is that even if they have the incentive, they don't have the capacity. Because you know who is in the environmentalist movement? It is oftentimes your scientists, it is your green engineers, it is people that are highly involved in things like green tech. Those are the kinds of individuals that are not able to provide the expertise, they're not able to provide consultation that are meaningful in order for AI systems to be able to be integrated with green technology or to be used for greener purposes. But secondly, they are far more okay with using AIs in ways that are fundamentally greener. So if on both sides of the house, people view AI to be inevitable and people view AI to be a very invasive part of their life already, at least on ours, they feel the cautious far better because at least they know that you are minimizing the environmental impacts of AI. Lastly, well, I want to just note that this argument is retrospective, which means that on our side, you still have some degree of good faith and some degree of goodwill to reform and influence the development of AI. But secondly, you want to just want to know that even if people stop using AI is widely used by private businesses, companies, and corporations. This is where AI reaps the most amount of its profit and money from. So even if that one Chinese bank stops using AI, that doesn't meaningfully change the development or the adoption of AI by wider companies that often use AI in more exponential ways. So at worst, at best, this seems proves 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people stop using AI. That is not impact they should buy within this round. Actually, Ryan, state your case. Don't what? Okay, sure.
Dave, if people are already anti-AI, why are you backing up something that's already unpopular?
So here's the analysis. I don't think that most people are against AI to the extent to which this team says. Because most people that are against AI are against the bad use of AI because it's oftentimes very chronically online teenagers and young adults that are very hyper aware about the ethical and environmental implication of AI. For the person in like rural Pahang, for example, or the person in Kelantan, they think, oh, it's fun actually, they have fun, right? Kids are generally speaking things on the internet. Those are the kinds of individuals that don't really care about the ethical or the environmental implication of AI. So on their side of the house, they're able to influence maybe a few individuals to stop adopting AI. But that cannot be the debate here. Because insofar as most businesses and most companies are still using AI, they cannot really fulfill their burden here, which is the demand for AI is still quite exponential. The demand for AI is still increasing, and therefore, even if some people stop using AI, the general rise of AI is still going to be inevitable. So at most, this team just gives you a bunch of spec knowledge about in 1983, in 2022, they give stupid numbers and say, oh, these are the numbers that are facts. On our side, we explain why even if there are some people that do not like to use AI, they still view AI to be integral, they still view AI to be significant, and because they view it to be significant, it is better for you to be able to reform the system as opposed to abolishing it outright, because these are things that are deeply embedded in our public and private systems already. In 1984, actually, got 2 forests cut down.
Hey, in 2004, January 7, thing happened.
Hey, another one in May 11 also.
Oh,
Yeah, you remember?
Okay, good luck. I hate you.
Also using your constitutional 1 minute.
Oh yeah. The AI generating logo. I don't know, I think we really need to check Raymond's phone because I feel like that response is very AI generated.
Yeah.
Because the response down the line coming from this government bench is that but people already know, so why do you need to help people that already know? But for some reason they can't seem to grasp their heads around the fact that there are people that know and there are people that don't know. The same people that Raymond tells you that's in Pahang that doesn't know of the harms of AI are the ones that needs to be targeted at the point of which the environmental movement has actively been pushed back. Let's just make it very easy for you to understand how this looks like. You have people that don't like AI right now. These are the people that have supported the environmental movement or are going to opt into environmental movement as they are pushing back. Once they opt into the pushback that they do, or like education and online camping, or are targeting people who don't know. The exact people that Bahang, that Raymond talks about, is the people that we're going to aim to reduce in AI usage. And what Ryan tells you is very important, is because everything that Raymond tells you on like the growing demand of AI and how AI is inevitable and all of this is something that you cannot stop is exactly because there is no in their world there is no opposition for them, the meaningful opposition in order to at the very least slow down the progression of AI to a significant degree. The reason why the green tech argument coming from Chan doesn't make sense is because the adoption of green tech at the very least of how they want to talk about how to make AI then sustainable only exists when you have early adoption of this green tech. But this doesn't happen. But at the point at which a lot of things that we see in status quo, we're like, oh shit, guys, we need to change to like wind, solar farms or whatever, is because we have already expended a lot of the world's fossil fuels. It's the fact that we are already reached an irreversible point in climate change is when we realize, shit, guys, we need to change. And this is likely going to be a case for AI companies also, right? I'm unsure how on their side they're going to be like, we're going to use green tech right now because it's something that is good. It's something that is untested right now in status quo. It's unsure whether or not it's going to cater their profit-minded business model. This green tech is going to allow them to generate more things or get more productivity from their tech is when they don't actually opt in. And the point at which they actually opt into green tech, even if you have a more collaborative approach, that they are always open to it, but the point at which they're going to actually incorporate these green tech into the AI company is when the damage is already irreversible because the climate has already been so bad that ice caps are melting and sea levels are already rising. And we think as a world that we don't actually want to live in. But best they prove is that your green tech cancels out the effect of your AI at that point in time. But all the damages is already done. Is one that's irreversible that we tell is the most important at this point of time. Even if they say that we don't prove that like we have made significant change, but I posit to you that the world in which they live in is one that is way worse. We don't actually have active opposition. Because even if it is the case that you are, even if the case that your opposition ones that is ineffective is necessary. What Varsha tells you is that when you don't have opposition, you don't have checks against the AI company. That they always do what they want to do until it's way too late and until they realize that they fucked up and they cannot continue to do this because it's unsustainable for them. Which means that even if you don't buy that there is some form of change that happens that already happened in status quo, which I'll talk about more later, we still prove that the pushback is necessary because it allows people to collectivize if they want to, in order for them to oppose something. If they want to principally oppose to something, even if they know it's going to fail, is one that is principally justified and you should allow under this later under our side, right? Sure, I'll take any one.
So AI is very late game, which means that they're likely to lose out, which explains why the transition to a greener AI can only be done when there's a pool of environmental expertise that you're able to tap into and therefore develop greener and far better and more sustainable AI.
So again, I think that still hinges on the question that Ryan asked on why the industry will listen to you. Because everything that Gelson tells you on wow, they have green engineers and green engineers and green scientists, they're going to suddenly make you some magical green tech that's going to reduce the water usage by 50% that allows them to maximize profit, is something that's uncertain. If Gelson wants to contest on the imaginative world that we live in, I want to contest whether or not they can prove that they are certain that your green tech is going to be one that's so effective they're going to implement it at that point of time. If AI then is inevitable and they still have yet to prove how you are able to make good significant change, because I still don't know why AI companies are going to work with this environmental movement, especially this, right? If it is really true on both sides that green tech is so good that it's going to happen, I'm not sure what the environmental movement really has to do on their side, because green tech companies exist in absence of the environmental movement, and all AI companies, if they really care about making more profits by integrating green tech, can circumvent the environmental movement on their side also. But then it leads us to the main question: what is the point of the environmental movement? Why is this so crucial under our side? It's because it provides the ability for people to collectivize on the issues that they face. All the things that Varsha told you on the effects on individuals are very harmful, and these are things that we have never heard a response coming from this government side, because active use of AI, if shut the fuck up, if the active use of AI on an individual level incentivizes companies to build more data centers because there's a core facet of how these AI companies work. Even if they say people don't care, people care more about generative AI or the bad use of AI, that's two things. One, people don't like when AI is used in a bad way, where it actively harms people in deepfakes. Two, people also don't like the general concept of AIs making the environment hotter. Look at Malaysia, fucking hot sia recently, and all of this can be attributed to just global rise in temperatures due to people just using more and more AI. The reason that we are limiting like the data center, building of data center within Johor is because people are actively opposing all these things. That people are boycotting companies because they are using the AI to generate their menus or whatever, is to show that there is already change in status quo, that these movements are effective because of the visibility that it gives towards AI, and the harms of AI is when we see all these actions happening. On their side, that never happens. Maybe they can prove on an uncertain level that the green tech is going to somehow help AI be better, but they can never prove on the individual level that people are going to collectivize, people are going to spread awareness, and people are going to tell each other that AI is actively destroying you and me, like me and yours life, and stop using AI on that level in order for any forms of change to cascade in the future. I think on that end, we win.
In 2003, other people got 2,000 trees cut down.
In 2026, Ryan Hughes. Historical moment. I know.
Okay. Okay. Alright. Sorry, I know I shouldn't type. But anyways, cutting speech in 3, 2, 1. I will be calm. I will be serene. I am not mouthing, and I will still win this debate. Look, I know reply speeches macam no one listen, but guys, please listen. I think we really win this debate. I really think we got shot in winning this debate. 3 reasons. Firstly, whether or not we need to push back against something that's already unpopular. And our answer is yes. Let's talk about two contexts. Firstly, people already against AI, and second, people who are somewhat supportive of AI. First, on people who are already against AI, isn't this good? Like, maybe AI's harm can be mitigated, and if they are used quote unquote well, that's fine. But what about cases where AI cannot be used quote unquote well? When AI has to take over one job because AI's point is that they can get stuff faster. The AI has to build data centers and use a shit ton of water, which makes it thirsty for everyone. Even if that's not true, think about the fact that AI is literally being used to bomb kids in Iran like literally 2 months ago. People are already principally opposed to AI. The AI is going to be incredibly harmful and people are just against it. These are people who are anti-AI. Comparatively, you lose them out because no matter how well you want to use AI, these people will just not back you up because they don't support the green movement. Second, if people are supportive of AI, as Yan Cheng points out, it's because people just don't know how bad it is. It's why the pushback of it is important because it creates awareness. If the kid from Pahang stops using AI to stop creating Tuntung Sahor, that's already a massive win because it means he's now aware of why it's bad and why this pushback is worth it. It's only the green movement that can exclusively do it because they have the most political and social capital. Politicians like Andrew Yang, Zoran Mandani, Greta Thunberg, they have significant political and social capital, which is why the spread of this is important in order for us to educate people. What is the bottom line here? You lose support because on their side of the house, people who are affected by AI feel alienated by the movement. People who don't know about the effects of AI will continue to support it haphazardly because there's no check and balance towards it, which is why this environmental movement is so important. Second, I also want a second clash on the environmental movements internally. Look, like here Raymond's speech, they just dropped the internal backlash that occur. And this is important because if you want to say the stuff like, oh, external buy-in macam no one winning, fair. But you don't know how people will react. But this explains why you lose your biggest supporters. Like I know the spec knowledge about a bunch of facts in 1984 and 2000, whatever. But it's true, right? These are victims of capitalistic automation. And guess what? Now you're seeing another trend of capitalistic automation rising. And what is their movement doing? Not just nothing. Literally supporting it. And they understand why it's significantly so damaging because they see the adverse effects of it towards individuals on the ground. What does this mean? People leave the environmental movement because this debate, and I already explained it, right? The scope of this debate isn't just AI. It's also just the pollution that occurs that these people affect, which is why they're likely to opt out of the movement. But the overall bottom line is, on their side of the house, you lose external buy-in because people who are anti-AI feel alienated and will not support things like policy change. Even if they do, like, it's not going to be a lot. But second, people who are unaware of AI, which is even where this debate lies in, you don't get that level of awareness, which is why they still likely support AI. The third issue is whether or not AI companies will listen to you. Guys, I want to know, there's legitimately no mechanism on their side. Like, check your notes, right? I want to know what gets them from supporting AI equals AI companies will be greener. Like, AI companies can opt for greener policies, which I don't know what they are, by the way, because they don't ground it, because it saves them money. They'll do it anyways, not because of the green movement, but because it's profitable. That means the debate has to operate in a context where companies end up taking less money, but they still take less money in order to opt for greener policies. But we already explained why on our side of the house, you have greater pushback in getting these AI companies to change, as considered by their side of the house. These AI companies have significant amount of lobby power and leverage. So it's really unclear to me why any of these AI companies would listen to this green movement when they have lost their literal biggest win card, actual support. When we explain why we get more pushback via these external supporters and internal supporters, people going out to the streets to protest, even the smallest impact of people not using AI, we already explained why that's a massive win for the green movement, and we think for all those reasons we are proud to win. Thank you.
Pause.
Yeah, I really wanted to say all everything.
Hey, Ryan, how you sit down now? You damn short on the camera, eh?
Yeah, I know, right? Crazy.
You have a long torso.
Okay. I feel like sitting down also, because I'm also calm and not loud. The bright side is we know for sure Ops case is not AI generated because the use of their constitutional 1 minutes would have been better able to type our material into their prompts and create more engaging material than they presented throughout the round. The strategy of the Ops so far has been very interesting throughout the timeline of their case. The whole round, their first speaker from Varsha had a very tangible impact. We need buy-in to oppose the rise of AI. Grr, we need to get people to stop using AI. Then they said, everyone and their mother hates AI and therefore will be against using it regardless. We told you two things in response to this. Firstly, Chan told you it ain't that simple because AI has always been integrated into our daily lives already, and it is currently at a point where it is so invasive to the point we don't even know if we're using AI in certain functions integral to our lives. But secondly, even if we wanted to get people to stop using AI, symmetric, bro. There's zero similar response that we just carried throughout all three of our speakers. Like, we literally just told you, if people agree that people hate AI, they won't use AI. You don't need to oppose it with the environmental movement regardless. Ryan realizes, oh shit, we fucked up. Let's make this case about the principle instead, and says all this kumbaya hoopla about the people in your movement and why they won't feel included. First of all, not an active debate, bro. This is this house regrets, not this house asks. I don't give a fuck about the movement. I care about the environment itself and whether it is specifically tangibly safe. Second of all, Ryan completely misinterprets our counterfactual. We are not backing the unpopular thing like what he POIs to Raymond. We are open to cooperation. We're saying, hey, your current model is shit. Your current AI is seriously damaging the environment. Let's find ways to make it better with further cooperation and further research and discussion. This was particularly important because it responds to the inherent stubbornness that billionaires usually have even in the midst of public pushback, and the rhetoric that we empirically see is true today about the inevitability of AI and why billionaires, even though, according to their own characterization, most people hate AI, continue to still champion AI as some sort of inevitable force in the overall market. Where was the model to tackle this from the opposition? It is clear so far, the current progress of the AI movement, of the environmental movement in opposing AI has achieved jack shit. Exactly. Even if you are right, mana impact. Like, if the point of buy-in is to get people to support you, we just prove why it is inexclusive. So our tangible impact in our best case is we work together with the AI companies to achieve better technology that will save the world, because your AI is no longer going to damage the environment to such a huge extent. Ryan's worst level of impact, even if he took his entire case at its best, is we have to be scared of a couple people posting some angry Twitter threads on Twitter because, oh no, my environmental movement no longer care about my feelings anymore. Pretty clear to see which one is more important now. Yan Cheng says, fuck, let's just wash everything out and say they achieve nothing. First of all, untrue. I gave you reasons as to why AI companies have default reasons to work with you to begin with. We told you why the incorporation of the environmental lens is actually pretty profitable and pretty good for optimization with regards to AI companies. The only reason as to why they don't work together with your environmental movement is because you hate each other's guts. no response. But secondly, even if it was true, there was no comparative coming from their side. If the company doesn't listen to us when we say, hey, let's work together and compromise to find a better solution for both of us, how are they going to listen to you when you say, fuck you, don't use AI? Like there is a zero comparative about whether or not their own model will be able to achieve that practical outcome. But finally, even in that worst case, we told you why there is an inherent cost that would even lose them, even if both sides were not able to succeed in convincing the AI companies. Because we told you the expenditure of political capital and the expenditure of political solidarity, because people are tired of fighting against multi-billion-dollar companies, because people have been locked in for decades with a nearly impossible and gargantuan task of having to convince millions, billions, trillions of dollars and years worth of investment into being completely eradicated altogether, means that people are now faced with the near impossible task of fighting God itself. The completely inevitable nature of AI that has unraveled itself and has integrated itself so insidiously into our lives is something that will never be able to be fully counteracted by the average man. This is why I disagree with Ryan. No need to listen to the reply. The outcome of the debate is still the same.
Wait, you don't need to listen to reply, and you should teach what?
I think these are the words that girl said. I think
Okay, why you rhetoric guzzling lah? You also rhetoric spit it out, man.
I'll say in 3 got how much in this country now.
Hey, but it's true. It's true.